السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Can you hear me? السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Yes. طيب الحمد لله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. We are having this live session to answer your questions. I received some, and if you have any questions, please put them in the comments or the live chat of this video. وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. I'll start with the questions that I have already got sent to me by Sheikh Naveed. Not the questions of Sheikh Naveed, not necessarily the questions of Sheikh Naveed. He sent them to me. First question is, what was the Aqidah of four Imams and others like Imam Bukhari, Muslim, and Tirmidhi? First of all, if you assume that they had the same Aqidah, if this is your assumption, I wouldn't really agree on that assumption itself, even if it's in fact and in reality that they had the same Aqidah. Because if I were you, I would assume that maybe they had different Aqaid. It's a matter of ijtihad after. In the end, it's a matter of ijtihad. So why do you assume that people have the same Aqidah? If this was your assumption, maybe it wasn't. The one who asked this question. So the Aqidah of al-Bukhari, the Aqidah of Muslim, the Aqidah of al-Tirmidhi, the Aqidah of the rest of the Imam, this depends on their positions. You can find this in the way of Bukhari authoring his book, Sahih al-Bukhari, for instance. Some of his other books, Khalq Af'al al-Ibad, for instance. You can understand what his Aqidah was by reading his books. Same thing for Muslim or Tirmidhi. Although Muslim or Tirmidhi, the ones you mentioned in your questions, you cannot really figure it out when it comes to all of the issues that you care for nowadays. It was a little bit different. You assume that everyone had the same tendency to talk about the issues of al-Aqaid, like Imam Ahmad, for instance. No, it wasn't like that. So you need to take this into consideration. خلاص? But those are al-Hadith. And what you expect from them is to follow the Aqidah of al-Hadith. So you're not finding anything that is different from the Aqidah of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal radiallahu anhu. But this is like a general opinion about what their Aqaid was. In the end, if someone was silent about something, you cannot claim that he agreed on that or that he disagreed with that. You'll just, in Arabic we would say, لا ينسب لساكت قول. You not claim that someone had this position while he was always silent about it. He never tackled the issue. But take this into consideration. Right? I think the questions got these. I didn't have that number of questions on WhatsApp. Now it's a lot. Not sure why. لكن ماشي يعني we'll try to cover that. The other question is this is a nice question. It's not really a question. It was just a funny thing. How did Ibn Hajar used to go to al-Azhar? This was, I asked some of the students in some of the durus, maybe in Nukhbat al-Fiqh or something. I asked them, how do you expect? What are your expectations about Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani? How did he go to al-Jami' al-Azhar? So Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, an Egyptian scholar, lived and died in Egypt, radiyallahu anhu, and he used to go to al-Jami' al-Azhar al-Sharif in order to give durus there or to stay there, and also he used to commute in old Cairo. So what was the means of transportation? And the answer is a mule, and this indicates that the man was rich. A normal person or a middle class person would use a donkey. A horse is for war. A camel is for long travel. Donkey is common. Mule is an SUV. This was funny, but he insisted on asking it. He couldn't get the answer, so this is the answer. Let's get back to real questions. These are questions from before. Let's take the questions from today first and answer the questions from before. Like, let's see. Did Qadi Abu Ya'la consider Ash'ari to be Sunni? I'm not really sure. It's not really important, to be honest. Did that person consider those people to be so and so? Yahi, not really important. Yani, what do you think of them? Have you studied their opinions? What is the difference between their Aqidah and our Aqidah? This is what you should care for, and if you know the answers to these questions, you will not really care for the opinion of al-Qadi Abu Ya'la. And to be honest, I do not know what the opinion of al-Qadi Abu Ya'la was about the Ash'ari. His book Akhsar al Mukhtasarat was affected by the Ash'ari methodology. Yani Hanbali positions, mostly Hanbali positions, but in an Ash'ari pattern. Akhsar al Mu'tamad, unlike Ibtal al-Ta'wilat, for instance. طيب. I do not remember anything about Qadi Abu Ya'la saying anything about al-Ash'ariyya. Maybe you find that in one of his books, but I do not remember any of that now. What is the maximum distance? You understand that there's no difference between two people, and if the answer to this question, what is the distance between two people praying, right? Praying in Salat al-Jamaah. So if you have two people praying in Salat al-Jamaah, whether it's Jum'ah or any Salat al-Jamaah, as long as we are talking about two men, they should not be away from one another to the extent that two people can stand in between, and you do not leave that space. So I answered before. I gave that answer before when COVID was still in the beginning, and they forced people to pray in a similar way where they keep some distance. I do not really remember now the number of meters, but I'm telling you, two people standing in between. If you leave that space, you do not pray in Jama'ah and you are excused. And if there is a pandemic or something like that, this is an excuse for people not to attend Salat al-Jama'ah and Salat al-Jumu'ah, according to the relied composition of the Hanbali Madhab. according to my understanding of the reliable composition of the Hanbali Madhab. طيب. Side by side, of course. طيب, can you shed some lights, please, on the Masail works of Imam Ahmad, Usul al-Fiqh book, the Madhab, where does Ibn Aqil stand for the Madhab? But these very good questions. The books of al-Masail. This is from Naeem Hassan. The books of al-Masail. You understand that nowadays we have books of Masail that came from the students of Imam Ahmad. We still have the manuscripts. Some of them have already been published. And you have al-Jami' li-Ulum al-Imam Ahmad, which is 22 volumes, 9 volumes about fiqh, the fiqh of al-Imam Ahmad, that can be taken from any books of al-Masail that reached us. Are they important? Yes, they are really, really important. For whom? For the mujtahid in the madhab. So the students of knowledge who study the Hanbali madhab, whether they are beginners, intermediate, or advanced students, they have nothing to do with the books of al-Masail. If you do not understand what the books of al-Masail are, they are books in which one of Ahmad's students would mention the answers of Imam Ahmad to different questions. Sometimes he organizes the book to begin with the Masail, or the issues of worships, and then Mu'amalat, then marriage and other things. Or random Masail, different Masail. Right. They are important for the mujtahid, for the one, someone who is a great sheikh in the madhab, someone who practices ijtihad in the madhab. And we have nothing to do with that as students. They might benefit you when you become a teacher, for instance. You become a teacher who teaches advanced books of the madhab. Usul al-Fiqh. On the Usul al-Fiqh book, where the madhab, the books of Usul al-Fiqh are, we have many Usul al-Fiqh books in the madhab. The mu'tamad of the madhab can be taken from Sharh al-Kawkab al-Munir, which is the explanation of Mukhtasar al-Tahrir, which is taken from the book authored by Alauddin. The book I have just mentioned is the book of Taqiyuddin ibn al-Najjar, the author of Untitled Chapter. He also authored the related book in Usul al-Fiqh, and it's taken from the book of al-Mardawi, which is al-Tahrir. Mardawi's book is called al-Tahrir. Ibn al-Najjar's book is called Mukhtasar al-Tahrir. Right? And also al-Mardawi explained his book al-Tahrir in an 8-volume book that is called al-Tahbir. Al-Tahbir, Sharh al-Tahrir. Sharh al-Kawkab al-Munir والتحبير شرح التحرير. These are the most 2 important books in the Usul al-Fiqh of al-Hanabilah. Lately, it has been published another book that explains Mukhtasar al-Tahrir by al-Ba'ali, the author of Radd al-Nadi, Sharh Kafi al-Mubtadi, and this book is called forgot. الذخر الحرير شرح مختصر التحرير. الذخر الحرير, very good book. These are the most important books in order to know the reliable composition, in order to see the development of the madhab, in order to have more, in order to have an idea about the philosophy of the different positions in the madhab, not necessarily the reliable composition. You will refer to 4 important books by 4 great A'imma. the book of al-Qadi Abi Ya'la, the book of Abi al-Khattab al-Kalwadani, the book of Ibn Aqil, and you asked about him, the book of Ibn Qudama. تمام. العدة للقاضي أبي يعلى، الواضح لابن عقيل، التمهيد للكلوذاني، وروضة الناظر لابن قدامة. If you want to see a Hanbali who doesn't really restrict himself to the common stream in the Hanbali Madhab, who thinks freely but with Hanbali taste, then at-Tufi. But this is not for beginners, it's for mashayikh, not even students, mashayikh. Also the Musawwada of al-Taymiyyah, the family of Ibn Taymiyyah, his father and his grandfather, Shaykh al-Islam Majd-al-Din. This is also an important book, and they refer a lot to it in the relied upon books of Usul al-Fiqh of the Madhab. طيب. How do you know who is the jamaah? Any group of people is a jamaah. If you mean al-Sunnah al-Jamaah or something like that, they all claim to be the jamaah. The Prophet ﷺ said, ما أنا عليه وأصحابي, that I am following and what my companions follow. How do we know this? Yani ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us all. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What is the Hanbali position on what? Structures over graves. There are people who use the hadith of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu to say we should level the grave of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Do you mean like building something on a grave? And some people use the hadith of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu. I'm not sure what hadith this is. You might be referring to something that I have in mind right now. You might not be referring to it. I'm not sure. But in the end, a lot of madhahib do not prevent or prohibit building on graves, building something like that on graves, not masajid, not houses. We are talking about making the grave higher than usual. Khalas? And if it is disliked, some madhahib they say it's disliked. If it is disliked, then the dislike becomes permissible whenever it's needed. And definitely if it is a grave of a prophet or a messenger or a wali or a scholar, then one of the needs is to distinguish this grave from other graves. Right? Is atheism growing in the Arab lands? I'm not really sure. I do not think so. Atheists in the Arab world are really stupid. I'm not really sure. And you might find an atheist who might say, Insha'Allah, bi'idhnillah. But basically, they are not really smart. What are the scholars doing to fight atheism in the Arab lands, as many youngsters are going towards this? So basically, you assume or you consider that a lot of people are going towards atheism, but you still asked whether it was growing or not, because you didn't know. Because the actual meaning, the literal meaning of a question is that you ask for explanation or clarification. This is the question. So you had an answer, nearly you had an answer for the question, but you still asked it. Anyway, what are the scholars doing to fight atheism in the Arab world? If you were a scholar, you would know. But scholars would love to keep it a secret, so they do not tell anyone except for themselves. Do the Hanabila have a different understanding of who Shaykh al-Islam is? I noticed that they call Imam Ibn Taymiyyah Shaykh al-Islam even though he had some problematic stances on matters. They do not have a different understanding. Shaykh al-Islam is a laqab that is given to any scholar who has vast knowledge. So Ibn Taymiyyah was qualified to be called Shaykh al-Islam. And the Hanabila, all of the Hanabila who came after Ibn Taymiyyah, didn't really find any problem in calling him Shaykh al-Islam. Sometimes they call him as-Shaykh, sometimes they call him as-Shaykh Taqi al-Din, and a lot of times they call him Shaykh al-Islam. This doesn't mean that there were no other Shuyukh al-Islam in the Hanbali Madhab. There were a couple of them, by the way, like his grandfather, Shaykh Majd al-Din, like Shaykh Islam Muwaffaq al-Din ibn Qudamah, radiallahu anhu, and other people. Ibn Taymiyyah's problematic views or opinions, they are known, and the Hanabila avoided them, and most of them didn't get affected by those positions, and most of them ignored and disregarded such positions in al-Aqaid and in al-Fiqh. And some of them authored books to tell you that these positions do not belong to the Hanbali Madhab. But it shouldn't be a problem. Okay. Questions from above. Was the book Radd al-Jahmiyyah written by Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, or is it falsely attributed to him? In my opinion, it is falsely attributed to him. There are a lot of problems. The book itself and the way of writing this book, a lot of things show you, a lot of evidences that show you that Ahmad Hanbal would never write something like that. In addition to some problems in the asanid, in the chains of narrators. طيب. ما هذا؟ يا سلام. طيب. What is your opinion on Dr. Yasir Qadi and Hatim al-Awni in reference to the issues of Istighatha? Both of them stated Istighatha is haram, but not shirk. Okay. بارك الله فيهما نفع الله بهما. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them for what they do for Muslims. And I'm not really following what they are doing. But I read some of the books of Sheikh Hatim al-Awni, by the way. Very good books. Not according to the Azhari ways, but beneficial books in ilm al-hadith. Istighatha, if you are asking about al-Istighatha being haram but not shirk, this can be a position in the Hanbali Madhab, but I haven't made up my mind about it, because you cannot find this in the books of the Madhab. But it's definitely not shirk. Being haram or not, this is another issue. Being haram or disliked, being haram or disliked or permissible, or it depends on how you do al-Istighatha. It depends on your wording. Yani, ask me after maybe 25 years. How is Athari Aqidah studied? in my طيب. I always start with لمعة الاعتقاد, and that's why the first thing I did was to write or author حاشية on لمعة الاعتقاد. لمعة الاعتقاد is a very good book. I'm not sure if there is a better alternative. So I am thinking about the Mukhtasar of al-Ayn wal-Athar. And I haven't seen it yet. The book didn't reach me. It's published and everywhere, but not in Egypt. And I'm trying to get it, but it's really difficult to get it. So I need to read it because it has been published lately. And I have never had the chance to see the manuscript. I couldn't even reach the manuscript of the Mukhtasar of al-Ayn wal-Athar, not al-Ayn wal-Athar itself. Al-Ayn wal-Athar is a book for intermediates or upper intermediates. But the Mukhtasar can be good for beginners. This is what I expect. I'm not sure. So the curriculum that we have already stated before is to start with Lum'at al-I'tiqad, then Qala'id al-Aqyan. Qala'id al-Aqyan can be studied along with al-Ayn wal-Athar, same level. That's why the students of Qala'id al-Aqyan who finished Qala'id al-Aqyan had the chance to listen to my explanation of al-Ayn wal-Athar, most of the important parts that cover the Aqidah of al-Hanabilah. And they couldn't really continue because the other parts of al-Ayn wal-Athar, they were like a debate between the methodology of al-Hanabilah and their positions and the methodology of al-Ash'ari and their positions. This might be difficult to be explained in English. Most of these things are going back to some linguistic principles. So as I said, in English, Lum'at al-I'tiqad, then Qala'id al-Aqyan, then or in parallel you study al-Ayn wal-Athar. After that, above then al-Ayn wal-Athar and Qala'id al-Aqyan, I do not really recommend studying in English. But there are other books that can be studied at the same level of Qala'id al-Aqyan wal-Ayn wal-Athar. Most of them are the books of Shaykh al-Islam Muwaffaq al-Din ibn Qudamah. خلاص? Especially if you start at that point studying some issues of al-Aqidah separately. So after finishing Lum'at al-I'tiqad that covers most of the topics of al-Aqidah, after finishing Qala'id al-Aqyan that covers most of the topics of al-Aqidah, and that part of al-Ayn wal-Athar that covers most of the topics of al-Aqidah, if not all of them, for Qala'id al-Aqyan wal-Ayn wal-Athar, you start studying something that tackles the issue of the attributes only, like Damm al-Ta'wil by Shaykh al-Islam Muwaffaq al-Din ibn Qudamah, or not or. This is suitable for someone at that level. Then you study something that tackles the issue of the attributes only, the book of Sheikh Mar'i al-Karmi that is called Aqawil al-Thiqat. Then you study something that tackles the issue of the attribute of al-Kalam, like some of Ibn Qudamah's books, and so on. So you can develop in that way. Above then, Qala'id al-Aqyan wal-Ayn wal-Athar, I do not recommend studying anything in English. It's nearly an intermediate level of Ilm al-Kalam, above or higher than al-Ayn wal-Athar wa Qala'id al-Aqyan. Where are we? Which one would you prefer for a beginner? Akhsar al Mukhtasarat, Umdat al-Fiqh, Dalil al-Talib, Zad al-Mustaqni. I'm sorry, I cannot answer this question. You restricted me to 4 options and I wouldn't choose any of them. طيب. Usually I would have given you a long speech about how to avoid asking such questions, especially if you are leading. So it's a leading question. You are going somewhere. It's either Akhsar al Mukhtasarat, Umdat al-Fiqh, Zad al-Mustaqni or Dalil al-Talib. And as a sheikh, you're not allowed to say anything other than that. So you are restricted. It doesn't work like that. You could have asked me, what is the most suitable book? Look at this question. What is the most suitable book among the books of al-Hanabilah for a beginner? Or if you really want to ask about these books, what do you think about these books studied by a beginner student? And you list the names. These are better questions, Ya Maulana. Which one would you prefer? So you cannot mention anything other than this. Are Hanbali and Salafi the same? No, they are not. Are they different? Yes. Why Salafis are Hanbali in nature most of the time? They think that they are Hanbali. They are just deceiving themselves. Some of these things can be answered if you just read the introductions of حاشية الموفق على لمعة الموفق, the English commentary of لمعة الاعتقاد. We answer some of these questions. What is the difference between Salafiyya and Hanbaliyya? And also the end of لمعة الاعتقاد. Shaykh al-Islam Muwaffaq Din al-Qudama tackled some of those issues and we explained them. If I remember correctly, these two parts, they cover what you need, what you might need. خلاص? That I answered your questions. They deceive themselves. They are not Hanabil. You see, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab said, in criticizing the most important books in the Hanbali Madhab, in the Hanbali Fiqh, he said, أكثر ما في الإقناع والمنتهى يخالف نص أحمد. Most of what you have in Iqna' wal-Muntaha, the most two important books in the Hanbali Madhab, they contradict with the clear statements of Imam Ahmad. Have you met a Salafi who doesn't really respect Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab's opinions? So a Salafi should not be a Hanbali, and if he is Hanbali, then he either doesn't understand what a Salafiyya is, or doesn't understand what a Hanbaliyya is. Allah challenged the Quraysh to produce something like the Quran and said they will never be able to do it. How can what? How can it be a valid challenge if it's made impossible? This is an issue of al-i'tiqad. You have two positions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it impossible, as you said. This is one position. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it impossible, which means He took away from them the ability of producing something like the Quran. This is one thing. Another position, it is impossible. They cannot do it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't take anything away from them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made something, or said something, or تكلم بكلام that can never be produced by any created being. This is another position. You see the difference? This is an issue of al-Aqidah, and it's an issue of al-Aqidah that can be studied in Usul al-Fiqh too. واضح؟ So how can it be a valid challenge? It's a valid challenge because basically the meaning of this challenge is, even according to the position that he made it impossible for them, he took away their abilities to produce something like that. It's valid because the purpose of this challenge is to prove that this is the creator. And if someone can take that ability away from you, then he is the creator. So it's simple and it's not complicated. And by the way, the majority of scholars hold the position of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't take any ability away from them. He just made something that, or said something, or تكلم بكلام that can never be challenged by them. It can never be produced by them or by anyone. طيب. Let's see. Did Imam Ahmad, may Allah be pleased with him, engage in ta'wil in the way of the Asha'ira? Imam Ahmad would do the same ta'wil of the Asha'ira in one case, that it has been narrated from the Prophet ﷺ or his companions, but he wouldn't do it out of ijtihad. So you find a lot of Ash'ari saying, Imam Ahmad did that ta'wil in that ayah. Yes, because he was following some of the companions, because he was following some of the reports that that reached him, not because he did ijtihad and chose that ta'wil and chose that meaning, specific meaning. That's why you study in the Hanbali Madhab that the ta'wil is absolutely haram, except for the ta'wil that came from the Prophet ﷺ, companions, the Salaf. And the word Salaf in that context should be explained wisely, and I did so in the Durus. It's not important now to repeat this. We do not have a lot of time. Was hadith written 200 years after the Prophet Muhammad, like Bukhari, maybe? Yeah, but they were not 200 years. Yani, before that, at the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. We are talking about maybe 90 years or so. Not after the 90, 80 years, maybe something like that. I cannot say for sure when. You cannot find this clear in books, but we are talking about 80 years, 90 years. Writing wasn't an important thing, as you know, for most of the scholars. Al-Bukhari himself, after the hadith has already been written, Al-Bukhari himself didn't rely on writing the hadith. That's why he said, I would memorize the hadith and wait for a couple of months because I was traveling. Then I would write it down after a couple of months. And he was a great memorizer of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Why was Imam ibn Taymiyyah raised above Imam ibn al-Jawzi in the Hanbali school? Because Ibn Taymiyyah is better faqih, nearly better muhaddith. You can question it. Better mutakallim. He's better at everything. His contributions to the madhab better than the contributions of Ibn al-Jawzi when it comes to al-Fiqh wal-Hadith. But Ibn al-Jawzi had other important things that do not really affect the Hanbali school. Affects the tafsir, the language, and other things. Ibn Taymiyyah received the madhab from the most two important people. The student of Majd al-Din ibn Taymiyyah, his grandfather, which is his father. Ibn Taymiyyah is the student of his father, the student of, who is the student of Majd al-Din ibn Taymiyyah, the second most important person in the Hanbali madhab. And he received the madhab from Ibn Abi Umar, the student of Ibn Qudamah. That's why Ibn Taymiyyah can be the third most important person in the Hanbali madhab, or the fourth most important person in the Hanbali madhab. Ibn al-Jawzi's positions in fiqh are not that important. Now, al-Jawzi was a great scholar, so he contributed to a lot of ulum. Do not expect that person to be influential when it comes to certain branches of al-ilm. لا, you'll find a lot of things, but not the highest quality. One of the greatest books that were authored by Ibn Jawzi, rahimahullah, was the Manaqib, the virtues of Imam Ahmad. It's a beautiful book. I think it has already been translated. I'm not sure how good the translation is, but it's a very good book. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Why did the many early scholars like Tirmizi, Ishaq, etc. make no differentiation when speaking about attributes like hearing, seeing, and attributes like yad? Why are they different? They're not different. Yani if you study in al-Aqid that they are different, this is because this is how the Aqidah of the people you are reading for, you are studying their Aqid, this is how they agreed on differentiating, categorizing. The Salaf didn't really have the categories. So what type of differentiation do you expect from them? The way of the Salaf is clear. We believe in all that. We do not explain it. We do not give any interpretation. It's clear and easy and simple. Was Ibn al-Jawzi Ash'ari? Ibn al-Jawzi had some Ash'ari positions, positions that agree with the Ash'ari school, positions that agree with the Hanbali school in Aqil, positions that do not belong to anyone. He came up with a very good theory about the attributes. It would have been the best thing unless the Salaf told us about how to understand, how to deal with the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how to understand the ayat and the hadith in which the attributes are mentioned. Now, so Ibn al-Jawzi was a mujtahid. So Ibn al-Jawzi, that's why we say Ibn al-Jawzi doesn't really represent the Hanbali school when it comes to al-i'tiqad. Doesn't represent the Ash'ari school, but they like him. Okay? Why do the Hanabilah affirm the kalam of Allah in its literal meaning? إيش هذا? Who said so? Is this Abdurrahman from Australia? I hope not. They do not do this. لا. They just say كلام الله سبحانه وتعالى بصوت وحرف. Because the evidence, the hadith, proved that his kalam subhanahu wa ta'ala is بصوت وحرف. We do not explain any of that. We reject the literal meanings of these words, and we confirm and affirm a metaphorical meaning for these words without specifying that metaphorical meaning, and this is called tafweed. This is the relied upon position of the Hanbali Madhab in the attribute of al-kalam. This is really summarized. We explained that in the Hashir. I saw narrations by al-Humaydi and Ahmad ibn Hanbal saying that deeds are conditioned for an iman. No, this is your understanding of what they said, not what they said. Are these narrations authentic? Yes. And is this a position Hanbali A'imma took? No, because this is your understanding, not what they said. I can explain what they said different. This happens, Ya Mashayikh, this happens a lot. Please listen to me. This happens a lot. You think that I know Arabic, or even I know English, and I read something in English, and it definitely means so and so and so. And once you give yourself the chance, or listen to someone else who challenges your understanding, you see, yes, I was blinded. I didn't think of the other possibility to interpret that thing. And not any other possibility. It's another strong possibility to explain the same statement. And what I'm telling you now is, it can never be understood like that. That deeds are conditioned for Iman, or a prerequisite for Iman. Yeah, this is not correct. And by the way, Ahmad wouldn't tackle that issue from that perspective. What Ahmad really said is that al-Iman can be represented by things that you say, things, beliefs in your heart, and things that you say and things that you do, and beliefs in your heart. This is what the aim of al-Hanabilah said after him. Is there a chance for me to join your academy? Ahlan wa sahlan, you can join the Madrasa al-Hanbali. Marhaban wa ahlan wa sahlan. Just message the admin. Yes. How will a new ijtihad become a mu'tamad opinion in the madhab 100 years from now? Example, in science or technology. Yani, I think you mean the issues of fiqh that are relevant to new fields like science, technology. I'm not sure about science. Let's say technology, like for instance, online transactions, for instance. How can it be the mu'tamad? I will tell you how. You find someone like me, very knowledgeable about the Hanbali madhab. Okay? And then I will have books and students. See that? So after 100 years, when I die, hopefully I will be in Jannah, and I would receive a lot of rewards because I already mentioned the relied upon position, while other people were busy asking about, did that person talk about that person, or did that person hate the other person, or they were busy teaching useless books that do not really establish people in their madhab. And if you didn't understand the parts where I joked, this is on you, not on me. A serious answer. When there is someone who is an authority in a field, people follow him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy for him. Things are facilitated. So nowadays we consider the positions of al-Buhuti. At the time of al-Buhuti, maybe other people didn't consider his positions. But nowadays, if al-Buhuti said something in his shuruh, we consider it mu'tamad. After 100 years, people considered the positions of al-Khalwati. He's a student. Ibn Qaid al-Najdi, al-Khalwati is a student. Ibn Awad, Ibn Qaid's student. Safarini, and other scholars. I hope you understand how it's done. Someone is an authority, khalas, it is forced. In the end, it's ilm. This is ilm. You can troll on the internet. You can insult. You can make memes and comics. You can practice these ill-mannered things on the internet. The ilm are in the books. You will never find the mu'tamad on the internet or on Hanbali madhab groups. It will be in the books. The contributions of men, real men, not people who study anything, anywhere, with anyone. This is I promise you this. Let's take a couple of questions and stop. Because we have a dars, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What is the concept of something has a probability of making you slip into haram? I believe you are asking about sadd al-dhari'a. Sadd al-dhari'a. What is the concept of sadd al-dhari'a? If something has probability of making you slip into haram. It's based on your madhab. If you're asking about the Hanbali madhab, it's a little bit complicated. I teach a part of it in the durus, but it's a little bit complicated. Yeah, the question, please ask me this again when we have another live session. Please ask me this when I'm not in a hurry. Please ask me this again at some other point. All the admins, please keep this question. It's a very good question. I will try to explain parts of Sadd al-Dhari'a in live sessions, but this is a topic of Usul al-Fiqh. It's an important topic, and it's a complicated one. It's actually some of what the mujtahid does to give you the rulings in the madhab. Do the Hanabila attribute direction to Allah? Astaghfirullah al-Azim, ya akhi. Barakallahu feekum. No. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. No. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Good question, Bets. Yes, good question, Bets. I'm not sure if this is your name. It's common today from Asha'ira. I mentioned the Asha'ira and Maturidiyya being al-Sunnah. They mentioned Hanabila with conditions and caution. Is this a new trend or was always an issue? It wasn't an issue, but it has always been like that. So they always say, Fulana al-Hanabila, the good of al-Hanabila, those good people among the Hanabila, and all of them. The problem is that the word Hanabila indicate people who belong to a fiqhi madhab, a aqadi madhab, a madhab of aqidah, and even a madhab of tasawwuf or tazkiyah. Commonly, madhab of fiqh and aqidah, right? Ash'ari, this is something in al-i'tiqad, this is aqidah. Maturidi, this is aqidah. So they have this confusion in their minds. Whenever they say al-Hanabila, what comes to their minds is or are those Hanbali in fiqh who had very bad positions in al-i'tiqad. So they say the good ones, the good Hanbali ones, not all of them, those fudala. And they are definitely wrong. And they cannot do this. But in the end, al-Hanabila are minority. So you do not find the Hanabila fighting that attitude of al-Ash'ariyya or al-Maturidiyya. And it's not important to fight it. And our way and our Imam's way is not to get into such fights, debates. So we just work, we just serve al-ilm. We should be dedicated to this cause, serving al-ilm, supporting the madhab of Imam al-Sunnah wal-Jamaah radiyallahu anhu in both fiqh and aqidah. And that's it. This is a good question. طيب. And it's wrong. What they say is wrong. Why is it wrong or how? Ask me about this next time maybe, or keep that question in mind. What do the Hanabila think of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and his works like Kitab al-Tawheed? This is from al-Fishani. I'm not sure how to pronounce it again. I'm sorry. I promise you that we will start make like or give durus, like critical readings of some of his books, and we will start with Nawaqid al-Islam, and we will do Nawaqid al-Islam. خلاص? I promise you this, and I am inshallah doing it soon. خلاص? Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab is rejected in the Hanbali madhab, definitely rejected, to the extent that Mufti al-Hanabila in Mecca, who died in the 13th century, late 13th century, this man, whose name is Ibn Humayd, didn't want and couldn't include his biography in his book As-Suhub al-Wabila, a book of biographies, the biography of all of the Hanabila that came after the time of Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, and the ones that Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali missed. Okay, so we are talking about maybe 4 to 500 years of biographies, and he didn't mention him. He mentioned his father, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab's father. He mentioned his brother, and he didn't mention him. And when it comes to him, he insulted him, calling him qarn al-shaytan. It literally means the horns of the devil. Yani it's an insult. An innovator who caused a lot of disasters in the Ummah. Al-Hanabilah really rejected Muhammad ibn Wahhab. And his brother, who was a great Hanbali scholar at the time, refuted his claim, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab's claim, all about the Tawheed and everything that he mentioned in his da'wah. And by the way, the problem is not in the book of Tawheed. The problem is in how this book was explained. It has problems, but if compared with how it was explained and the teachings of his students and the students of his students, the second generation or the third generation, it's disastrous. I think we can finish the questions. Let's try. What is the stance of the Hanabilah on the knowledge of the unseen that was bestowed to the Prophet ﷺ? The Hanabilah do not really tackle such issues, but you'll find that the Hanabilah do not reject that thing. And a lot of them, like Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali and others, they talk about that the Prophet ﷺ had knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't give to any of his prophets or messengers or anyone. And but as I said, the way of al-Hanabilah, the methodology of al-Hanabilah, that they do not tackle such issues, unimportant issues that might not affect the core of your i'tiqad. خلاص? If you ask me, if you ask about how the Hanbali Madhab would tackle that issue, if we have to tackle it, this is different. Most of the Hanabila scholars, Sufis, and what method do they follow in Sufism? Yes, most of them were Sufis. Most of them, the majority, starting from, you can start from anyone, but if we are talking about the Turuq al-Sufiyya, خلاص, then let's start from Sidi Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. خلاص, Sidi Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, his student was Shaykh al-Islam Muwaffaq al-Din ibn Qudam. Most of al-Hanabilah were Qadiriyya, following the tariqah of Sidi Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, including Ibn Taymiyyah himself. Shaykh al-Islam Taqiyuddin Taymiyyah was also Qadiri. And his student Ibn Abdul Hadi, who was really a supporter of Ibn Taymiyyah, mentioned that in a very good book, by the way, that tackled some of these issues. Some of the Hanabila in the late phase, they belong to al-Khalwatiyya, like al-Khalwati. And some other scholars, like al-Ba'li, also was Khalwati, right? I am Shadhuli, for instance. My Shaykh in the Tariq is the Shaykh of al-Hanabila, Sayyidina Shaykh Muhammad Sayyid al-Hanbali. And we are both Shazuli, following Tariq al-Shadhuliyya. Yes. Some say Sharh Muntaha by al-Buhuti should be preferred over Kashaf al-Qina'. Yes. As Kashafi's earlier work of Buhuti, is it correct? طيب. شرح منتهى الإرادات وكشاف القناع. كشاف القناع was authored first. شرح منتهى الإرادات was authored later. كشاف القناع is a bigger book in which you find more details that you will not probably find in شرح منتهى الإرادات. شرح منتهى الإرادات has some additions in that you do not find in كشاف القناع. Both of them together are the mu'tamad of the Hanbali Madhab. So if you refer to one book, do not do this. Refer to both books, and if you can refer to the hawashi of al-Muntaha wal-Iqna'. This is the right way of determining the reliable composition of the madhab. It's exhausting, yes, but it is the right way. Al-Buhuti, having an opinion in Sharh Muntaha al-Iradat that contradicts with that contradicts with his opinion in Kashaf al-Qina', when it comes to the same issue, when it comes to the same place in the book. Yani, an issue in Kitab al-Salah, an issue in Kitab al-Salah, the same chapter. This means that the latter position of al-Buhuti should be his position, the al-Buhuti's position. That will probably be the reliable composition of the madhab. Do Atharis see Kitab al-Tawheed by Ibn Khuzaymah as a good book of Aqidah? No. Kitab, some call it Kitab al-Tajsim. Kitab al-Shirk. Kitab al-Tawheed has a lot of problems. Calling it Kitab al-Shirk, Kitab al-Tajsim, it might be a little bit exaggerated, but it is criticism of the book, and the book should be criticized, the book should be filtered. No, it has problems. طيب. We have a dars in 2 minutes. I will try to finish these questions quickly, inshallah. Do Athari seek? We answered that. What is your memorization method, Shaykh? Repeat anything 50 times. If it's a verse or poetry, for instance, repeat it 50 times with a misbaha, sibha. خلاص? With sibha 50 times. Next verse 50 times. Link them together 50 times. The third one 50 times. Link the third with the second 50 times. The first, the second, the third 50 times, and so on. Exhausting, doesn't let you sleep. You memorize very few verses in a long time, but you'll never forget it. If you want to memorize something just to enhance your skills, not to have it in your memorization forever, then just repeat 50 times each verse without the linking thing. Use a sibha, it's very fine. Please, if the Ya Sheikh Naveed or anyone, I want to stop the questions. I want just to answer these ones and finish. Many Ash'ari shuyukh use the term fudala min al-Hanabilah. Yes. Is this description accepted by the Hanabilah? Yani wallahi, the Hanabilah didn't really care about such terms, and they didn't really talk about those who claim the Hanabilah to be fudala and non-fudala, if you understand what I mean. And as for myself, I do not really like this way, because I can also say fudala al-Ash'ira, fudala al-Maturidiyya, or in other words, fudala al-Shafi'iyya, fudala al-Hanafiyya, fudala al-Malikiyya. Ya akhi, and I explained why it shouldn't be like that. I explained why before. Not now. Ask me again, inshallah, in another session. Let's start with these questions that I wanted to answer. But now, it's not suitable. Is the Prophet ﷺ able to hear us from far distance without the need of angels? Some groups claim the Prophet ﷺ can hear and see us from far distances. Let me answer this later. I can tell you a little bit about this. Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qayyim said, scholars in our Hanbali Madhab, Ibn Taymiyyah and al-Qayyim said, the dead, not the Prophet ﷺ, the dead can know, hear, and can get happy or sad by the circumstances of the ones who are alive, their relatives. You see? I will tell you about this in detail next session. Inshallah, we can start with these questions. So what do you think about the Prophet ﷺ knowing and hearing? Why doesn't Sheikh Muhammad Said Hafizahullah spread his lectures and shuruhat on YouTube? You are missing shuruhat of real Hanabilah on social media, because al-ilm is not taken from social media. Yes, very good question. Very good answer. What are valid excuses to delay the salah past their time? Their time, preferred time. Yes, Maulana, it's me, by the way. Yeah, Sheikh Abdul Rahman, Hadak Allah. The valid excuses to delay the salah past their time. If you are allowed to combine prayers, this is something that, or if you are allowed to combine prayers like Dhuhr with al-Asr, Maghrib with al-Isha, preferred times if you have an excuse, a real excuse, and this is studied in the books of fiqh, that keeps you busy without being able to perform the prayer in the normal time. What is the term preferred time? This is wrong. We do not say preferred time. What do you mean by preferred time? Preferred time like the beginning of the time? Question is messed up. No. What is preferred time? Maybe you meant وقت الضرورة, وقت الاختيار, time of choice, time of necessity. So if you want to postpone the prayer and this is what I was answering. If you want to postpone the prayer to the time of necessity, you need to have an excuse. What are the excuses? Something that keeps you busy, like some of the conditions of the prayer, for instance, or something that is really important and you cannot skip it, and it keeps you busy, like work, for instance. And if you do not do this job, you will get fired and you will not have any money, and it leads to bad consequences. I'm trying to give you examples. In the books of fiqh, you will find details. You study this. You have already studied it. Could you elaborate the statement by some scholars saying they want to die upon the faith of all women? Does this mean a return to tawheed, or does that mean something else? Why don't we keep that question and answer it in the next live session, inshallah ta'ala. But let's stop here for tonight. Inshallah, we will have more live sessions in the near future. Barakallahu feekum wa jazakum Allahu khairan. See you inshallah very soon. Please, if you still have questions, postpone them to the next live session, bring them to the next live session. Wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.